Hello once more. Good to see you all today in the second day of our conference. While we have a small delay, I would like to join Mr. Robert Andrzejczyk to invite our guest.
Good morning, everyone. Dzień dobry. Yesterday evening, I promised you good weather. Here are. You know, it's the power of positive thinking. When I woke up early morning today, I decided to dress in light colors, not to adapt to the weather, but the weather to adapt to my dress. I have a great pleasure to introduce our today's keynote speaker, and he is the expert in positive narratives and positive thinking, positive stories. Professor Marcin Napiórkowski is a cultural semiotician. His scientific research focuses on contemporary mythology, collective memory, and popular culture. He is a professor at the Institute of Polish Culture at the University of Warsaw, and since 2024 he is managing the largest Polish museum, the Polish History Museum. Author of many books, and I will give you the titles of some of them. Contemporary Mythology, The Power of Imagination, Who Invents What Happened Yesterday, The Rise of the Dead, A History of Memory, 1944-2014, The Code of Capitalism, How Star Wars, Coca-Cola, and Leo Messi Guide Your Life, Turbo Patriotism, this is my favorite, Fixing the Future, Why We Need Better Stories to Save the World. It's quite an impressive work, isn't it? I'm sure that after hearing these titles, you would like to read all of them. Professor Napiórkowski is also active in Polish media as a columnist. He also runs a blog called Contemporary Mythology. It's my favorite blog, and I would like to ask for more entries. As you can hear, Professor Napiórkowski is not a stereotypical scientist. I will add to this picture that last week he received the most prestigious award in Polish music industry. This award is called Fryderyk, named, of course, after Fryderyk Chopin, the most famous Polish composer. The award was given to him for co-authoring the musical titled 1989, and Professor Napiórkowski is an author of the lyrics. After this brief introduction, I'm sure you don't want to listen to me any longer. You want to listen to Professor Napiórkowski. So let's feast on his ideas. Professor Napiórkowski, the floor is yours. Thank you.
8:30. When I received the email and it said 8:30, I thought, well, what a decent hour to give a lecture. But then I reread it and it said 8:30 a.m., which was a bummer. I'm terribly sorry for that. I have nothing to do with that. Still, I'm super impressed that you're here today. After, I hope, what was an exciting initial night of the conference. I would like to talk with you today about three things. First, I would like to propose a hopefully non-trivial definition of what a hero and hero worship is and why do we actually need it. Then I would like to strike a more grim tone and mention a disturbing process that may be called a second memory boom, which is a very destructive global phenomenon. And in the last part, I would like to give some solutions, some recipes. How can we actually use images of heroes to overcome this global trend. But first, I like to ask a vital question. Do you run? No, no, some of you. Who runs? Okay, so I don't. As you probably noticed, I'm not a very fit person. I still plan to start running, so I started research about running, and which is a good first step, at least for me. The research continues for 18 years now, I guess. But what I found is really fascinating. Like, there is actually a way of motivate people to run faster that they physically can. Let me give you some details. So that's actually an introduction to part one. You probably know this figure. It's a regular, normal Gaussian distribution. And whenever we test people on anything, their knowledge, their running speed, their strength, results will occur in the form of Gaussian distribution. So if we started, for example, throwing rocks at these glasses, some people will have perfect aim, probably most of us closer. Some people won't be able to throw a rock far enough, and some people, me in this group, probably will just randomly throw a rock on the second half of the room, because why not? But when we carefully analyze results of marathons, this is not what we get. What we get is this shape, which basically kind of look like normal Gaussian distribution, but have you noticed the spikes? These spikes are people who actually, for at least some time, were running faster than their maximum speed, so faster than Gaussian distribution. These are round times like 3 hours, 3:30, 4. Right before this moment, people were actually able to motivate themselves to run faster than possible to break their own personal record, which is a very well-known phenomenon in marathon running. Still, it didn't make me run any marathon. This is like a compressed version of this image. You see these spikes? There are significantly more people who came to the finish line right before the round time than there are people who came a little bit earlier. It's like, catching a train. It's okay to be even 5 seconds too early, it doesn't matter, but being 5 seconds too late, it's like not getting there at all. It doesn't matter. So let me test you. So it works because people are attached to numbers, and these numbers are significant to them. So, for example, to motivate people, what would work better? To say them walk throughout the whole year, 5,000 kilometers or 3,213. What would work better? 5,000, clear. What would work better? It's for, cycling, for example. 50,000 kilometers per year or 40,000 kilometers per year? Okay, so the answer for both questions is the second answer, which is surprising because it's not just about round numbers, it's about meaning, it's about sense. So the first number is, have you heard of Fitbit? It's super popular in the US, in Europe maybe not so much, but it's like a AI parasite that attaches to your body and measures everything. And one of the key elements of Fitbit is that it rewards you for doing supposedly good things like running, and 3,213 is India badge, the most famous, noble and popular badge in Fitbit. People are doing this and they are informed that your challenge is to walk throughout the Indian subcontinent from the most northern part to the most southern part, and you can actually check where are you on Google Maps. And this motivates people. So we are not just machines attached to round numbers, like 40,000 is better because it's cycling around the globe perfectly. So people are able to motivate themselves and to synchronize with other people, not just around round numbers, but when they feel that something has a meaning. And this was actually discovered way before marathons became popular. It was discovered by this guy, Émile Durkheim, who said that this invisible force that could make us exercise, weird, or run faster than we should be able to, is called social facts. And this invisible force is at the very source of collective memory. Whenever we do commemorative festivals, we do precisely this. Put significant timestamps, like anniversaries or other festivals, to motivate people to do something, to create this collective energy that will change this normal Gaussian distribution into something that is structured and meaningful. We can do exactly the same thing with time. We can do this with space, which is like creating special buildings to structure memory. It's like timestamps, but in space. For example, I know, Józef Piłsudski Museum in Sulejówek. I just made it up. Could be a place when Józef Piłsudski is celebrated in special place, because why not? And obviously, we can do exactly the same thing with people by designating certain dead or alive people to be these landmarks, to be like our Fitbit badges. And Émile Durkheim, the sociologist I've mentioned, was one of the great creators of sociology as a discipline, not only because he had these great ideas, which is always important, but also because he was a great teacher. And he had a lot of students, and two of them, Stefan Czarnowski and Henri Hubert, were actually the creators of the original hero worship theory that I'm recreating here. So, Stefan Czarnowski, the name sounds Polish because he was Polish and he moved to France and studied under Durkheim, noticed that heroes are actually human embodiments of collective values. They're exactly like finish lines or museums, but embodied in people. What they do is they show you a reference point for certain values to synchronize people, to make some effort in order to structure the society. It sounds a bit complicated, but when you think about that, heroes are like these points on the diagram that I've shown you that make people do certain things in certain times because they want to be like the heroes. So that's it. That's the definition of heroes and hero worship that I would like to propose to you, which is kind of important because we are experiencing right now a very disturbing phenomenon. Probably you are all here because of the first memory boom, a huge international movement that started somewhere in late 70s or early 80s that created the current large wave of memorial museums, that created a lot of practices of international memory, peace commissions, dialogues, international reconciliations, and other things like that. So if I were to list the most important elements of this initial memory boom that started in the 80s, and again, I'm not making this up, this is a summary of some scientific articles that have already been written on the subject. First, it created a new culture of memory. This new culture of memory is constructed of the phenomena like memorial museums or new ways of planning and creating monuments as public space, or mnemonic education, which is, I guess, a very important part of what you are doing every day with creating new interpretations for heritage. By the way we understand heritage right now as something open to many interpretations, vital, but not only to be protected, but also to be accessible for different groups. This is part of this large social movement, the first memory boom. It was created around memory of war. It was created in the time where people who were relatively young during the Second World War got older, and they were ready to transmit their knowledge to next generations. And very strongly, the first memory boom was created around this collective experience of unimaginable trauma that resulted from the Second World War. As a result, it was strongly saturated with this idea that deep inside, we are all the same. We are human beings, and we can learn a lot from past histories of suffering and trauma, mostly to avoid creating circumstances that led to the horror of the Second World War. So never again was the most important rule of memory in the first memory boom. Then, to a large degree, this idea that we are all the same, we should exchange experiences and learn from the past mistakes, led to this dimension of global integration. Memory was a bridge that was connecting different people, showing how similar they are, and in this respect, the first memory boom was a part of globalization and of a global culture that said, you might not be Jewish, but Holocaust is a founding part of your identity. You may not be Polish, but still you can learn a lot from what happened here, because we live in a relatively small world, and World War II gave us a very painful lesson what a small world means when we hate each other. And this led to this powerful idea that our fates are connected, that we run together in one marathon, and our decisions influence the life of people, even those people who live in really distant places. I have a very bad feeling about what is happening right now, because memory is still important, maybe more important than ever, but something wrong and twisted happened to the basic values of the first memory boom. I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but Make America Great Again is built around again. This is a mnemonic device. This is a thing that says, well, there probably was a better time. We can go back to restore something. So basically, Donald Trump and many other politicians that create a similar vision of politics, they don't reject memory. On the contrary, on the surface, they said we are all about memory. When Russian tanks invaded Ukraine, a lot of them were waving old Soviet flags. And to a certain degree, it was a historical reenactment of what a lot of Russian soldiers believed to be World War II happening again. So it's not like erasing memory. Current dictatorships and populist politicians still use all the devices, super powerful devices, of the new culture of memory. They still build museums, they still create monuments, and they still worship heroes. But all the other values are completely twisted. From memory of war, we went to war of memory. Memory is a weapon that you direct against your enemies. Universal human rights are replaced by different forms of egoism. So, because of our memory, now we need to, quote unquote, protect our borders against migrants. We don't think about universal human rights anymore. We think about protecting what ours, using as a source of these values the same traumatic events that 10 years ago were used to support help for migrants around the world. Global integration, and especially European integration, which was built around traumatic experience of Second World War, are replaced by different forms of particularisms. We need to think about what's close, what's here, because we won't be able to save all the people. We're not global anymore, at least according to these populist politicians that gain a lot of popularity also here in Europe. And common faith is replaced by national exceptionalism. We're not dreaming about making the world a better place anymore. We're dreaming about making America great again, or Poland, or Germany, or wherever you're from. So from memory as a bridge, from memory as something that was created to connect us to different people, to synchronize us with different people, we went to imagining memory as a wall that could protect us. And still, everything I said in the first part works. This national egoisms, anti-European movements, Trumpist America, they are still built around collective practices of time, space, and hero worship that synchronize people, but on a very different scale and with an entirely different purpose. But as you probably can see, I'm not a gloomy person. I'm an optimist. I've also donned happy colors today. Actually, it's like Polish uniforms, same colors. So, yeah. My job here is not to make you sad at 8:30 in the morning. My job is to give some solutions. And I don't believe in, again, history does not repeat itself. There is no coming back to the first memory boom. We need to think about something new that takes everything that was really good in the first memory boom, but also acknowledges the new challenges that we meet right now. And I don't have like a ready-made solution, but I have some intuitions that I would like to share with you. And these intuitions are super closely related to interpreting and keeping heritage open to different interpretations. So maybe you will find it interesting. So the solution I would like to propose is rejecting the original idea and maybe the original sin of the first memory boom. There is this fascinating book that by Krastev and Holmes, The Light That Failed. It's about the triumph and demise of global liberalism. And Krastev and Holmes suggest that the basic mistake that was made by global liberalism, and maybe also by the global memory boom, was believing that there is one common road towards future, that there is one common pattern of global memory that we can all just adapt, and whatever happened in New York 2 years later will happen in Berlin, 5 or 10 years later will happen in Warsaw, and there are no different models, different ways, roads towards future. There is one highway, and just the nations that will join later and nations that are fortunate to join earlier. I don't think it's the case. I think we can have different patterns, different interpretation. We can have a memory full of ardent conflicts and still keep it in some form of harmony. And recently, I had the privilege to participate in a large research project centered around solidarity movement. You already had some spoilers in the introduction. The result of this project was pretty unconventional. It was a musical, but let me assure you, it was a decent research project. I spent tens of hours making interviews with most of the living leaders of solidarity movement, with their friends and families. And what we have noticed, obviously, you might not know that if you're not Polish, but they are all super antagonized. They don't talk to each other anymore. Actually, it's a strong word, but they hate each other. And they disagree on some fundamental things like, should Poland be more left-leaning, and should we have repaired socialism, or did we make a good choice to abandon it completely and go towards capitalism? Sometimes they disagree on some non-fundamental things like, you're stupid and traitor. No, you're stupid and traitor, and like they just hate each other for no particularly good reason. But what was interesting is earlier, when I was working on typical research project and the result would be a book, my job, at least to some degree, was to decide who's right and who's wrong. To analyze facts and say, well, Lech Wałęsa here is not really true in his statement. What Anna Walentynowicz, that his former colleague and later enemy, was saying about these events seems more true. This is what historians do. But in this case, I was not a historian anymore. I was not a semitician. I was a lyricist for a musical. So we just had this story A and story B, and what to do with it? Well, musical, the form of a musical gave us the answer. I don't know if you've ever heard any musical. This is basically a super stupid form. When one person sings one musical, I'm not going to sing, don't worry, don't run. One musical motive, then another person joins singing something entirely different, and they sing together. And then the choir joins, singing a third melody, and they all sing together. It creates some audio and visual chaos, but there is a meaning in this chaos. There's sense, because they sing different motifs, but in harmony. You can hear harmony between different motifs. And the aim of musical is not to make everyone sing in unison, like Wałęsa should sing the same melody that Anna Walentynowicz, because it won't be a musical, it will be a medieval monophony, which is also interesting, but people don't pay to see that. In musical, the more musical motifs you are able to stack upon each other, the better musical writer you are. And this was a perfect material to do exactly that, to put all these people, or their scenic versions, on the stage together, singing different things, but in order to hear harmony, consonances and dissonances between different stories. It was a fascinating adventure, pretty positive result, but it also taught me a huge lesson about how we can think about heroes and memory. So what I think is that looking for different interpretations, we could focus more on polyphony, which is basically a harmonious difference. I'm sure that there are different ways, maybe better ways to show it than musical. It's not limited to musical form. We can do it in museums, we can do it in monuments, we can do it in public festivals to show different interpretations of the past coexisting on one stage and creating something more than separate voices, creating harmony. So from memory as a bridge or memory as a wall, we can move to imagining memory as a stage, a form of common place when different voices, different interpretations meet, and deciding who's right and who's wrong is not the part of the endeavor. Just the opposite. Juxtaposing different memories, even conflicting memories, makes our life richer, musically and not only. And this is, by the way, exactly what we're trying to do here in Polish History Museum. This will be a very large museum. We already have a building, as you can see, but we're still working on the permanent exhibition. And when I joined the endeavor some 6 months ago, we were still on the very early stage of building it, and I was completely overwhelmed by the scale. The permanent exhibition is planned to have over 7,000 square meters of surface, and it's created in the form of a labyrinth, actually. So one would need like 3 days to see this whole exposition. And I'm not kidding right now. It takes a lot of time. And at first, I thought it's a super stupid idea. And it's not going to work. Because nobody's going to devote 3 full days to studying Polish history in form of museum. It's just too large. But then, a lot of politicians and journalists started besieging me and asking, will this person be on the exhibition? Will that person be on the exhibition? And I asked the historians that work on the exhibition, will they? And answer to everything was yes, and this person will be commemorated on the exhibition, and this event will be commemorated, and that. So actually, this form of non-selective museum created something that can potentially be a museal equivalent of what happened in musical. So a very large common space where no major choices are made, where you can see this and this interpretation and that interpretation. So when we think about that, the exhibition will not be a finish line. It will be a starting point for many journeys. Obviously, it makes work in museum even more difficult because even after we complete the exhibition, there will still be a lot of work to do to create different lessons and tours and audio guides for different groups. But this possibility of not judging, not deciding, but creating the thing we really miss, the common space, is very tempting. And By the way, there is a very interesting parallel between this vision and what we have started with marathons. So when you take a closer look at marathons or, I don't know, string ensembles or orchestras, what you can see is that people don't actually aim to run the marathon in the very same time. Different groups of people set different goals. There are these who want to run a marathon in 3 hours. Is this possible? I guess so, yes? 3 hours, 3:30, 4, and there are some people for whom, and we have seen this spike on the diagram, 5 hours was their own goal. So running together in marathon and creating this synchronization is not about adjusting everyone to same speed, because this is not how it works. It's about tuning, like tuning the orchestra. We have different spikes, people group together, and the marathon as a whole creates this fascinating living organism when people group together to run in the similar tempo, to have it under 5 hours or under 4:30, but nobody's forced to join any group. This is why researching marathons is so fascinating, and it takes me so much time that I'm probably never going to run an actual marathon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Napiórkowski. Now it's time for Q&As, remarks. Any questions, notes, remarks? The upper row.
Thank you very much. I mean, incredibly clear and very, very convincing. Now, coming from neuroscience, from natural sciences, I very much like the kind of the Gaussian curve and the metaphor of the marathon and so on. But then, of course, you ask yourself, okay, what happens after achieving the goal? Will you then have a kind of compensation down? I mean, very often in all physiological processes where there is a great effort, there might be something coming back. So bringing it back to your comparison, wonderful comparison of the two memory waves of booms, you kind of just mentioned the sin of the first boom about being, so to say, one highway. And I wonder, I mean, universalism is a wonderful term, and in a way I always feel very, very guilty to argue against it, but then I like being advocatus diaboli. So my question is whether universalism is almost always egocentric universalism of whoever is more powerful or prestigious and so on to impress their view of things on the world, and whether this first wave was basically leading to the fact that certain, let's say, Anglo-centric, Anglo-American culture, English language, and so on, become the norm, and everybody else have to adjust, whereas this culture doesn't adjust to any other.
I would fully agree with that. That we have a lot of research showing that the supposedly global memory was actually Americanized memory. Even the experience of Holocaust was very strongly filtered through the screen of Hollywood, and people actually remembered watching Schindler's List, not dealing with any actual footage or data or witness testimonies. By the way, it works on different levels. The challenge of creating a Polish history museum is also asking about regional and local histories. One of the traps I see here is seeing Polish history as one unified history that will be transmitted from the center, from this huge museum in Warsaw, to all distant places. Let's invite people from Lower Silesia, Upper Silesia, Masurian Lakes, and so on, and tell them what does it mean to be Polish. It doesn't work this way. it can work the other way around. So we can invite these people and tell us what does it mean to be from Lower Silesia? What does it mean to be from Pomerania or Masurian lakes? And then from these different parts, we can also accentuate what's convergent, what brings us together, how these differences create something that can be extrapolated on as Polish identity. But this is, to a certain degree, different than what was the basic idea of the first memory boom. So this is why I believe there is a way out, because we're not repeating the old mistakes. We're trying to do it different now, not to fuel these local particularisms, nationalisms, and egoisms, but to show that it's great that we are different. And it's fascinating that we are different. And in being different, we can still be together.
Thank you so much. It was very inspiring. My brain is rushing now, so I think that's a good thing. But I heard you say you gave an example of one of the traps of this new way of thinking. What other traps do you see? Possible traps,
there are a lot of traps. There are a lot of traps. One of the traps is that when we realized that memory is so important, we made it a form of capital. So different groups will try to accumulate this capital. So what we are dealing here with now is commercialization of memory, is politicization of memory, and I don't have any easy answers here. This is why these traps are actually traps, because it's difficult to avoid them, because we need these elements, like, for example, Warsaw Uprising here in Poland became a very important landmark of identity in a lot of positive ways, also because it got commercialized and people actually are wearing t-shirts with Warsaw Uprising. But when we are passing this line, when it's capitalism that controls our memory and not the other way around, that memory mitigates the negative effects of capitalism. And again, no easy answers here, but there was this book Dune, and one of the protagonists of Dune, Leto Atreides, he said that first step towards avoiding the trap is knowing it's a trap. So I really deeply believe in that. Unfortunately, Leto Atreides never told us what the second step is, because he ran into trap himself and died. So let's hope we're not going to do that.
Do you intend to keep space open in the museum for people to do something, create an exhibition, basically? And if yes, do you have some initial ideas about that?
Yes, very much yes. So the first and second wave of memory boom that I've mentioned here, we're actually creating around narrative museums, which is great. I love good stories. Narrative museums were like books, and they told you a story, and you entered as one person and left the museum as a different, changed person, which is sometimes a good thing. But I think that building on top of that, we can achieve even more if we move from just narrative museums to participatory museums, when different audiences are not invited as semi-products that will be stamped and created into something new, but when different audiences are actually invited to co-create different exhibitions. And for example, recently, there is this super popular movement in Poland called, it's a real thing, I'm not making this up, Beep Beep, the garbage truck is coming. The garbage truck, uwaga, śmieciarka jedzie. The garbage truck is coming is a social movement of people in social media informing each other about interesting things that may be saved from dumpsters. And these people, it's a totally grassroots, bottom-up social movement. They came to us, to our museum, and they said, hey, why don't we put a dumpster inside this beautiful marble museum? And we put different things that were actually thrown away. And they should have been saved because they are precious archives or examples of great Polish design. And they saved a lot of these items, but what's even greater is that now the idea of this exhibition is evolving. It will be like a small exhibition creating a snowball effect, traveling around Poland and gathering new objects and new stories. And only the final of this exhibition will be in this huge museum. With already the social movement, there are over 1 million people in this, in the internet. So there are a ready-made audience that has some stories to tell us. There will be smaller exhibitions in different towns and cities, and the final version will be shown here. So this is great because first, it's less work for me, because someone will actually create an exhibition and give me a ready product. Clever. But also, it's not like distributing one correct content of memory. It's asking people, what is memory for you? What do you think needs to be preserved? And obviously the very idea of putting a dumpster or a garbage truck inside of this museum sounds super fascinating.
So I have questions. First, English being a norm makes my life a bit problematic, but I hope that I will be able to ask appropriate question. Second thing, it was phenomenal. It was really mind-blowing presentation of yours. I just want to keep in a format of musical ask, because we are all in a way interpreters. If you put a line to all the characters of your musical, if you put all significant people in your museum, there's still supposed to be, I suppose, some composer or someone who makes this as a harmony instead of cacophony. So who's the one? There has to be someone who is responsible to make all that things, different things, sounds as a harmony. And who's that? How to achieve that?
Well, I think it's you. Or you, or you. So that being an interpreter of heritage makes sense as actually this. So it makes you composers in this kind of musical endeavor. So again, when we were creating a musical based on historical materials, our task was really super limited. We had a very, very long interview with Danuta Wałęsa, the wife of Lech Wałęsa, when she described how was it to receive a Peace Nobel Prize in the name, obviously, of Lech Wałęsa, because he wasn't able to leave the country and so on. So she received this award, and in the interview with us, she said, yes, and then I just gave this speech that smart man wrote for me, but women are never allowed to talk in this kind of event, and if I had this opportunity, I would have said this and this and this, and my job was to make it rhyme. Nothing more. My job was to take her words. I was like a speechwriter for Barack Obama. You don't write a speech for Barack Obama. You listen what Barack Obama is saying, and you just make it rhyme, or whatever, you know. So my job was to make words of Danuta Wałęsa rhyme, and nothing more. And when I think about that, there's always this composer. But if we are ready to stand back, stay in shadow, and give the stage, and have one simple job to make it a harmony instead of cacophony, to make it agonistic but not antagonistic. People can disagree and not hate each other. And that's it. So it's your job, it's our job.
Let's have two more questions. One up there and one here.
And then me, sorry, I already have the microphone here.
Okay.
Who-
Who has the microphone has the power to speak?
So talking about power, actually, I think the question has to do with traps that I see. And in a sense, you've started to answer them with your previous answers. And the thing that made me most happy to hear was this grassroots dumpster that was going to be in the museum. Because I wonder, can we avoid having memories or a history of conflicts? Can we avoid the trap of promoting individuals when we talk about history? If we want to promote solidarity and universal values, we need a more flat kind of history. And how do we, in that case, get it? And how can we get to that history, the positive history, without talking about the conflicts, which I think is the one thing that we associate to history. If we look back at the first memory boom that you said was about the history of war, how can we move away from that?
I don't think that we have to move away from conflicts. We can also embrace conflicts if we can talk about them in a way that will not be destructive. I don't think that conflicts themselves are the main problem here. I would rather look for different kinds of conflicts, like, for example, whenever we focus on medieval history, we talk about kings and battles. And this is the way we talk about conflicts in medieval Europe. But there is this historian of energy, Václav Smil. I really strongly recommend his books to you. And he wrote this book, Energy and Civilization, and he showed how the whole medieval history may be explained by the energetic density of different kinds of woods. And whenever, for example, German cities were growing too large and they were running out of some kind of fuel, a different conflict started, but it was really triggered by running out of some kind of fuel, not by decisions of kings and princes or whatever, noble people. So there can be space also for conflicts, but maybe on different surfaces. And the other part of the questions about individuals and collective emotions and making history more flat, I believe we need individual stories to make history meaningful. It's like with Fitbit. You cannot make people care about 5,000 because 5,000 is a number. But you can make people care about walking India. And this is how characters, how heroes work in narratives. So we need them to embody and to be these vehicles of identification. But again, if you look for different surfaces, and if we look for local histories, for example, a random girl from a medieval town may be our hero, may be our protagonist. If we tell her story, as you know, gathering wood in a forest, not be able to find enough wood, then deciding to move to another town. This is, again, the story that Václav Smil tells us on numbers, but told in a very personal way, if only we have sources to recreate the history of the girl.
I truly liked your presentation. I thought it was brilliant, but but I do need to say that this whole discourse is obviously fruit of the mentality of our times.
Of mentality of our times?
Yes, like the whole discourse of inclusiveness and, co-creation and everything. It's sometimes pretty much saying we are kind of afraid of choosing because we need to be politically correct and we don't want to mess with someone and get some pretty strong reactions. But even when you co-create in your museum with people, you invite certain communities or groups to express themselves, but what they are and what they think of being, they are two different stories. So I guess my question is, we already live in a world where we are invaded by private stories, you know, on social media. So why would I go to your museum and not on the social pages of someone? It's the same kind of exhibition going around there. So yeah, that's my point.
That's a very good question. And the answer is, it's very difficult to filter information in real public space. You have to make a lot of effort, either as a host of a public space to hide some things, or as a guest of a public space to don't look. When you are in the internet, you only see the stories that you want to see, and you only encounter the people that you agree with. In our museum, I'm sorry to say that, you will see a lot of things that you won't like, that you will probably hate. I know, if you were an aficionado of military history, probably not, I guess. There will be a lot of military history, but there will be history of Catholic Church and of peasants, women history and industrial history. So what we lack right now is spaces when people encounter different stories and different people who are not like them. And I really think that on top of political correctness, which I really believe in, and other mentality of our time things, this is a very reasonable strategy to survive, because this is how the world really is. People are different and they have different stories, but unfortunately social media and algorithms often make us forget about that. So this is just undoing the harm they are doing.
Okay, we have last question.
About the audience and the need, maybe, if you see it, or maybe not, you see it as our inherent and born skill to be open to polyphony and to read it instead of and interpret it instead of being overwhelmed by it, because you've said that people are attached to numbers and symbols and heroes, but I believe that some of us, maybe many of us, need some closure, need some answers, and need some solution to deal with the overwhelming world. And variety of options, variety of narratives. Of course, I get what you say about the bubbles and the social media tunneling vision of world, but on the other hand, there is so much more to overwhelm us like outside of social media. And this is, I think, one of the dilemmas that I see when I'm listening to what you're saying. So do you plan to prepare your visitors somehow, to train them maybe, to be left at the end of the exhibition, of the experience, with something tangible and not a mess in their head?
So the interesting thing is that people are unable to listen to other people singing without joining. Like the natural reflex when we hear people singing is to join with our own voices. So what happens in operas and other noble places is really super weird, because this is not a natural way of participating in music. But there is a super simple experiment that answers the question, basically. So if you start a monophony, like thousands of people singing the national anthem together, people will join in monophony. And they will be super happy, because we love singing together. It produces a lot of endorphins. It's better than running. And I truly believe in that. But if you will start a polyphony, and by the way, you need some conductor or someone like that to engage people in that, people will join in polyphony. So if you give them the simplest possible way, like a canon, dum dum da dum dum da dum da dum da dum dum dum, the people will join in polyphony. If you give them simple way of joining, they will join in polyphony, and they will be super happy to sing in polyphony. And well, I'm not sure if there are probably some neurocognitive analysis of that, if the brain response for polyphony and monophony is more ordered or messy. I don't think so. I think that both responses are very positive. We're able to clearly structure and analyze polyphonic music, and also polyphonic debates. We don't have to be given any special instructions. We just have to be given permission, and that's enough.